Let's open in prayer, shall we? Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, I just want to thank you, Abba, for your mercy, your compassion, and your loving kindness. And the fact that, Abba, no matter how far short we may fall in our walk and how we understand you, and how, no matter how much we may hold on to the things of this flesh, you still forgive us and you still show us the way if we will only allow ourselves the privilege to listen to your wise counsel. And so for Abba, I'm thankful that in everything that happens to us, and this is how I see things, that nothing happens by accident, but everything happens for a greater purpose. And for that, I thank you, Yahweh. I always look for that message in there. No matter what I'm going through, I always know that there's a message in there somewhere that applies to me in some kind of way, and it's for me to discover what that is, because that came for a reason. And that is true for all of us if we're bold enough and brave enough to confront it and look at it for what it really is, and incorporate it into our lives in such a way that we can use it to our advantage and to the enemy's disadvantage. And for that, Yahweh, I thank you for the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach that allows me the privilege to stand here today and speak your word as best as I can possibly articulate it. I pray, Yahweh, that anything of me that is not of you be discarded, and I pray, Yahweh, that you give me the encouraging words that I need to speak today, Yahweh, for the purpose of edification for whoever may need it today. This is what this Shabbat is all about. And I thank you, Yahweh, for this Mishpachah in Yeshua's mighty name. Amen. Well, last week we didn't have a Sabbath service here. It was the last day of unleavened bread. And I know some of you are wondering what in the world happened. Well, there are a lot of things that happened, and I'll get into them in bits and pieces because it's not any one thing that actually happened. It was a series of things that happened. And as I saw these things unfolding in front of me, I began to realize that there was a pattern. And this pattern was showing me over and over again that I need to pay attention to a pattern. And that pattern is very important. And if we ignore it, we wind up suffering severe consequences. And quite frankly, at my age, I'm tired of suffering for consequences because I choose to ignore signs that come my way that I need to deal with, and I can't be ignoring them. Well, where do I start? Well, I guess where I'll start is this way. This is not intended to be my typical structured message. You're not going to see a bunch of notes up here. You're not going to see a bunch of my thoughts up here. Instead, this is really meant to be a more heart-to-heart kind of a conversation today. Do I have your permission to just speak from my heart? Can I do that? Yes. Thank you. Because I feel that this is what I need to do today. It's not about a structured message. This is not about that. This is about my observations about things that have gone on for me in my life that I feel I need to share with you. And if I had to give a kind of title to this, Yahweh gave it to me this way: pride that will kill you. Pride that will kill you. And I'm just going to leave that up there because, like I said, I don't have any notes. So I thought to myself, well, where do I begin with this subject? And where do I end? And where I will end is I will give you a series of scriptures that I think will help empower you as you examine yourself with this issue of pride that will kill you if it's not brought under control. And that's true for all of us, and we all have it in varying degrees, and it manifests itself in various ways, which I'm going to give a bunch of illustrations about this. And my hope is that you will look inside and pierce inside of your spirit and see for yourself where something like this is lurking within you and that it is disempowering you, and will help you to bring it to the front and confront it. And so, where do I start, I thought to Yahweh? Where do I start with this? Because it's such a broad subject, and I can narrow it down, but I've got a lot that I want to cover. Not that I expect to take a long time to do this, but I've got a lot of different stories to tell. And each one of those stories tells another story about this central issue about pride and what it does to us and how it will destroy us. And so, where do I start? Well, where I start is I go back to my forefathers. It came through them, it came through my family lineage, it came through me, and even on my deathbed, some of you know my story, I was on my deathbed in 1982. I was a few short months away from actually perishing. And quite frankly, I could care less that there was a creator. I could care less that I had a beautiful young wife that I had just married 2 years before, almost 3 years before. And I could care less that I had 2 unborn children that hadn't even been thought of yet, who were going to come into the world a year later, or a little more than a year later. I could care less. Because I was so wrapped up in my pride that I wanted to die because I was in so much pain and suffering. I was just wanting to die. Leave me alone, I want to die. This will be an interesting point a little later in my story, if you'll just hold that there and keep it in mind when I get to this other point a little later on. And so I didn't seek a creator. I didn't ask for a creator to come and heal me and save me and take me out of my pride and my misery and bring me into this walk that I find myself in now. Little did I ever think way back then that I would be standing up in front of a bunch of noble people as yourself and being able to give my particular testimony about this issue in my life. And so how funny life can be. How funny the roads are that Yahweh takes us on that we least expect and contemplate. And how funny it is and how strange it is that we go through these experiences in life and that those experiences then train us and groom us to the point where we can stand up and give a testimony that will help us to not only grow for ourselves but help other people to grow as well. And so, with this message, I've had to confront my own pride in my own life. The interesting thing about what I'm going to tell you is that it was lying not in a dormant state, but lying in a secluded kind of state where it wasn't real obvious. And oftentimes those are the kinds of weapons used against us that are the hardest ones to fight. Because it keeps rearing its ugly head over and over again and you never quite understand, where does this root come from? Why do I behave in the way that I do? Why do I think and I feel the way that I do? And so you just brush it off and you move on. But then weeks or maybe months later, it rears its ugly head again. And so these are patterns of behavior that manifest themselves in all of our lives. And so we just brush them off. But they all have a root, they all have a foundation. It always comes back to pride, is where it comes to. And so, when I was on my deathbed, Yahweh spoke to me one night. Actually, in the next morning as I was waking up and coming to consciousness, He spoke to me and He said, "Today you are healed. You can go out and eat whatever you want." And that voice was so clear to me, and it was so authoritative, that instantly I had this measure of faith impregnated into me that I just knew that this was the Creator that healed me, and there was no evidence that I had any problems with my stomach. It was all gone. The spirit of death that had entered into my body and into my mind was gone. It had vacated the premises. And so I knew, and I went out that day and I ate pizza and I ate chili, all the things that I wouldn't dare touch before. No problem. I was completely healed. And it was only a few short weeks later that Yahweh then led me to the Messiah. And so I accepted the Messiah. And I pursued the Messiah probably more than I pursued my wife. But she was an easier catch than Yeshua was too. But the thing is, I pursued the Messiah and I was hungry and I was thirsty to know about the Messiah. And so I did that. And so I'm not going to go through all of my life in Messiah. That's not the point of this. My point is to show that I was dying, and in my self-righteous pride, I wanted to die and I didn't want to live. And I could care less whether a Creator could heal me or not. I don't care if the world's greatest evangelist walked in the room and proclaimed that he could heal me. It wouldn't matter to me. I could care less. I probably would have spit at him. But that was my pride. That's the way I was. And so even through my converted life, as I go through the years down the line, I can look back now and I can see where this pride, even though I believed in Yeshua, was still lurking in the background. It was still following me as a shadow. And it was still causing me to sabotage various areas of my life. In my marriage, with my children, with business, even with brothers and sisters in the Messiah, my outside family, in various ways it would cause a problem. because I thought I was right and everybody else was wrong. And I have a saying, sometimes you can be technically correct, but spiritually wrong. And those are defining moments in our life where we have to really ask ourselves the question, should I pursue what I'm about to pursue based upon the concept that I am prideful and I think that I'm actually right and I want to win this battle? And sometimes the best thing to do is shut your trap. Sometimes it's best to shut your trap and bring your pride under control, because you're about to kill yourself with what you're going to do. All because you want to be right. And you want to get your point across. And that's all that matters. I'll deal with the broken pieces later. So for me, I was like a bull in a china shop. I would just go through and I'd wreck everything. They used to call me the bulldozer where I come from. That's what I did. I just bulldoze over top of everybody. And at a certain level it works, and at certain times it's necessary, but it really should be the exception to the rule, not the rule. And I applied it as the rule. That's where I was wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of speed things up again. I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of some of the issues that I had dealt with and where I am today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to backtrack and hit the rewind button probably about 3 or 4 weeks or so. And so we're leading up to the Passover and the days of unleavened bread, and there's a lot of craziness going on. My wife, my daughter, myself, a few others are going around doing all kinds of stuff preparing for this. It's a lot of work, and then you're thinking, then we had the betrothal as well, and that all went off very well. And so we had people coming saying, oh, we'll help with this, we'll help with that. And so those people, when it came time to help, were not there. And I thought to myself, this is wrong. And it was wrong. But I kind of let it get up underneath my skin a bit. There's that pride, you see. This is wrong. And I got into a little bit of an attitude about it. And that was wrong. I should not have allowed that, but I did. I kept it under control, but it still got to me a bit. Because what bothers me today, unlike it did many years ago from where I come from, as I had stated several weeks ago, where I come from, this kind of foolishness did not exist. So I find myself living in a matrix kind of world, because on one hand, I live in a world where I was groomed that your word was everything. When you gave your word, you gave your word, and your brother or your sister could take it to the bank. And I could take it to the bank. It meant credibility. It meant credibility. Today, their word doesn't mean anything anymore. They bloviate and they tell you all kinds of stuff, and that gets underneath my skin. There's the pride. It gets under my skin. It's irritating and it aggravates me. And I have to really bring myself under control and say, Abba, I know you're dealing with your people with where they are, not where I expect them to be. And I have to bring myself back down to earth again and ground myself down and not have animosity and anger and pride because people are not living up to what their mouths are saying. And so, we then come to the betrothal, and a number of people said they were going to be there, and there was a certain amount of them that didn't show up. And that disappointed me because it disappointed my daughter. This was a big day for her. And so I go, here we go again. People not coming through with their word. And then what happens is we get through the ceremony, everything's great. We had a couple that visited the betrothal from an ex-congregation we used to attend. It was a Messianic congregation. And the troubling thing was with that, because I'm afraid I'm going to miss this, so I want to say it now, even though chronologically it's out of order, but I need to say it now because I'm going to forget it if I don't. And that is, what happened was a week later after betrothal, my daughter gets a phone call from the wife of this couple. And she says, it was a beautiful ceremony, but, the but word, that usually means, I hear everything you're saying, but I'm now going to proceed to tell you what's wrong with the situation. So it's self-justification. So she begins to say, I am troubled, we are troubled because we heard your father kept saying this word, something like Yahweh. Now these are Messianic believers in Yeshua. Okay? And, huh? She didn't know the word. It's something like Yahweh or something like that, because they're not taught to speak that name where they come from. I know their doctrine. It's a Jewish doctrine. One that forbids the name of the Father. Matter of fact, the leader of that place says the name of Yahweh ceases to exist when Yeshua came into the world. Wow. That's bold. That's bold, denying the name of the Father. But that's not my point here today. My point is to state that so that you understand where this couple comes from. And so she begins to tell my daughter that we don't believe in Yeshua. And my daughter goes, "What? Are you serious?" My father got up there and he recited Yeshua's words. He recited Yeshua's name. He recited the whole concept of the betrothal, how Yeshua will come and take the bride up to meet the Father, and then he will marry the bride. What part of that did you not get? And so they say, but you kept saying this other word. So in our mind, this word, Yahweh, or whatever it is you're saying, nullifies Yeshua, because that's what that leader tells them. That if you accept the name of Yahweh, you make the name of Yeshua of no effect. It doesn't exist. But this is the insanity in the body of Messiah today. And this is the reason why we have to be careful about who we go to have teaching us, because they've got doctrines of demons, sad to say, in the body of Messiah, and they're corrupting people. And my daughter actually got hung up on by this woman. She hung up on her. So my daughter calls her back and says, "Oh, no. We're friends. You're not going to do this to me. We're going to talk through this, and if you don't accept it, fine, but you're at least going to understand we do believe in Yeshua. We do believe in His blood. He is our Messiah." And I got to tell you, she ripped a bunch of scriptures into that girl, and that girl got so frustrated, she says, "You know what? You guys seem to really know your Bible, but we just still come back to the fact that if you're calling on this other name, then you don't believe in Yeshua." And so this is pride. This is pride, because here I am telling you I believe in Yeshua, and you're telling me, "Oh, no, I don't accept that." That's pride. It's fleshy. Because you're basically calling me out as a liar, that I'm trying to deceive you. No, what's really going on is you've got so much pride going on inside you that you can't receive instruction in truth. Because the Spirit of truth I'm speaking to you now is trying to lead you into that truth, and you're saying, "No, thank you. Don't come near me. You're a heretic." That's pride. That is pride. And so I heard that and I thought to myself, wow, no wonder the husband looked very disturbed in his face at the betrothal. So, that being said, that ended that right there. I'm going to retract back now to when we come up to the next evening, which is the Passover. And so I hear a number of people are going to come, and they don't come. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe they went somewhere else. I hope they went somewhere else. But if they didn't go somewhere else, shame on them. And that's a truth. But the truth of the matter is, because I was already in my pride and angry about things that were leading up to this point, I was making judgments in the wrong kind of spirit. And that was wrong. And so what happened was, I was not too happy that people didn't show up. And then I went through and I explained before we took of the bread and wine, if there's anybody here who has not examined themselves sufficiently, did not discerning Messiah's body, do not eat of the bread and don't drink that wine, lest you bring judgment onto yourself. I mean, I went through a whole explanation on that thing. And then we proceeded. And I thought everything would be okay. That was an illusion. Self-induced illusion. Because humans being what humans are, they're going to do wrong. And they're not going to take it seriously. And so the next night, in the next 2 or 3 days, we have people doing things that is in the flesh, and they're already trampling on the blood of Yeshua. And now I'm mad again. And I'm thinking to myself, Abba, what do I do? What do I do? In days past, I would take the spiritual 2x4 and go through the room and beat the living daylights out of everybody. And I would do a good job. I really would. There'd be blood all over the place. But that's not Yahweh's way. That's not the dispensation that we're in. And that's not the point I want to get across. I'm trying to go against my nature. I'm trying to go and put my pride under control, and I'm trying to deal with this in a merciful manner, because mercy is the weightier matter of the Torah. And I spent a lot of years with the mishpat, which is the justice part. Get the 2x4 out and beat everybody to death. And then when they come to, we'll sit down and renegotiate this thing. In the meantime, you're going to get your beatings. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but then it's not. Because at the end of the day, I have to answer for all the things that I did in that kind of way, which was wrong. And so, the night to be much observed comes, and people who were going to be there and should have been there were not there. I'm like, we put on this whole event. We spent money. We spent a lot of time. Quite frankly, I was so exhausted by the end of each night, I was literally starting to walk like this. Literally. I was hunched. I was so exhausted physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then watching this stuff, it was aggravating. And so what did I do? Probably around midway through the first night of unleavened bread, I was so aggravated, I went all the way to the back where the huppah was, where my daughter got betrothed, because nobody was back there. It was dark. It was a full moon. And I went back there and I prayed, and I asked Yahweh to help me with my pride. Help me with my anger. Help me with my disappointment in the fact that your people, their word means nothing. What do I do with that? Not everybody, but some. And I realize there are legitimate things that do come up and stop people. And I understand that. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about, where, again, today, I was told by some people they were going to be here, and they're not here. And so when I hear that, I start looking at it and they're like, this is not a person that I can trust his word. And so I have to figure out what to do with that. And it's very disappointing. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm saying what I'm saying, and I'm thinking to myself, John, keep yourself in check, because your pride wants to rise up again. Your voice is going up and you're getting irritated because you're reliving the emotional experience. So it's only natural for the pride to use that as a vehicle to bring its ugly head back up again. But I'm under control. I'm okay with it, as you'll see as I go along. And so, the next day of unleavened bread comes. Unleavened bread is called a mikra. It is a commanded assembly. Commanded. Nowhere in there does it say, well, I think I'm going to sleep in today. But yet I find people don't show up. I find that people are out sightseeing for the day, spending money on the Shabbat, on the high Sabbath day, which is totally wrong from Scripture. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the devil is really running it down my throat this weekend. I mean, I've got a lot to complain about. And I'm angry because Yahweh's feast days are being trampled on by people who just simply don't want to respect it. And they don't want to have enough respect for other people to be there with the people. It's okay. I can't do anything about that. That's their choice. They'll have to answer for that. My battle is to keep this pride under control. That's my battle. So then I have a person who comes to me and says, I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the Passover and the betrothal because I was stuck in bed for 3 days with a severe affliction in my hip, and I simply couldn't even get out of bed. I understand that. I have no problem with it. The interesting thing about that is, the day before that person tells me that, another person who was part of this fellowship comes and tells me, Yahweh told them that they should not come to this fellowship anymore and stop their car from working to prevent them from coming. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I think it's time for the men in the white coats to come and get me now and take me to the funny farm, because this is becoming a joke. But what's happening is Ha-Satan is coming at me and he's hitting me with all these different things, and there's far more than this. I don't have time to get them all. I'm kind of condensing this down just to illustrate a point. So I have a long talk with this person, my daughter and myself, and they're convinced that Yahweh told them they're not to come here anymore. Yet when they stop going to the other cesspool places,
And I hate to use that word, but they are cesspools. And this person was coming here. This person was developing a lot of fruit. I mean, if you knew this person before they came here and you saw them after they were here 6 months, there was a huge difference. And I don't mean that I had anything to do with it. What I'm saying is this community was bearing the kind of fruit that allowed this person to grow to where they were. And they even acknowledged that themselves. But they still said, I believe Yahweh told me that I need to close the door here and I need to go wherever it is I got to go back to. And I said to the person, I said, you know what? You understand that the devil could tell you a story like that as well, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe is it possible that the devil's so ticked off that you are developing fruit that he's actually speaking you and telling you not to come so you go back to where you were before, like a dog returning to his vomit? And the person says, I concede that is possible. So now you're telling me you actually possibly are even doubting that Yahweh actually spoke to you. Yet before you were so convinced it was Yahweh's word. Now you're not so sure. See, I'm used to having a lot of people blowing smoke up my sphincter, to be explicit. And it gets a bit irritating. I would prefer that they just stay quiet and don't tell me stuff like that. It's irritating. But it's going to happen anyway. I got to deal with it. I don't much like dealing with it, but I got to deal with it because the whole nature of that is to rise this thing up inside of me. That's my battle, is to rise up and keep this thing under check. Because it's real easy for me to get into this state of mind. And it is for all of us here in your own way. Some of us have much better self-control over various areas of our life than others do. And that's okay. Some of us were blessed because we don't have the family history and genealogy curses coming down to us. We had stable families. They had love. They had respect. They had compassion. They had forgiveness. And if it's bred into you from the time that you're born, then it's a natural trait. It's a positive spirit that you have. But some of us were brought up in very dysfunctional backgrounds. And it makes it very difficult, and it's rearing its ugly head all the time. The problem is most people don't make the connection, and they're too scared to face it, even if they did make the connection. And so they pretend it doesn't exist. So, first day of unleavened bread comes and goes. I get told by two people who don't know each other, a day apart from each other, that they couldn't come and the other one is not coming. So I'm feeling from the devil that there's an assault on the ministry, which I felt for a while, but now it's really ratcheting up. And I think it had a direct correlation to a great night that we had on the Passover. It was the best one we ever had. It's the best one I ever had. I've been doing this almost 34 years. And so then what happens is the week goes through. And then we come towards the end of the week. And my lovely daughter says to me, in essence, I don't think you love me. And I think to myself, and what I'm going to say now has no negative thing on my daughter whatsoever. This is about me and my pride, and I want to illustrate how stuff works. I'm the guinea pig up here. I'm laying myself out in the open, okay? My daughter says she doesn't think that I love her. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's incredible. Really? I brought you into this world. I almost took you out a few times over the years, but I didn't do that. I had mercy and I let you live, you know. And as I'm listening, I'm asking Yahweh to show me what in the world is this all about. And then somewhere deep in my spirit, Yahweh starts to show me what the dynamic is. And the dynamic is, I'm not by nature, where I come from, I'm not an affectionate person by nature. I don't kiss, I don't hug. I do that for you guys because you do it for me and I feel compelled to have to do it in return. And I actually feel genuine about it, but it's not easy for me. That's not where I come from. My family, was kind of a contentious family. They didn't kiss, they didn't hug each other, they didn't tell each other they love each other and all that kind of. I didn't grow up with that, and I really admire people who do come up in that kind of a family background because they have that natural love in them like that, and I don't have it. It's not that I don't love, it's just that I don't show it physically. And so I don't hug my daughter, I don't tell her I love her, I don't kiss her all the time, you know, and I'm thankful that Yahweh gave me a wife that comes from a very loving, extremely loving and compassionate family. And so I've always had that example in front of me, but it just was never anything that I felt connected to. But I admired it, and I still do to this day. They're much better people than I am in that kind of a way. But my pride didn't allow me to kiss my daughter on a daily basis, to hug my daughter, tell my daughter I'm proud of her, tell my daughter that I love her. And so I had a problem when I'm confronted. Because at this moment, Yahweh says to me immediately, He says, be careful how you handle this. Be very careful how you handle this. The ministry could go under if you speak just one wrong word and handle this the wrong way. And right away, Yahweh told me, you need to call off the fellowship for that Sabbath, and you need to go into prayer, and you need to go into soul searching to understand what is going on here, because the devil is attacking this ministry, and he wants to cut it off at the head so that everybody else just scatters. And it's not about you guys not believing in Yeshua anymore. I'm confident of that. You'll find another place to go and you'll continue on. You persevered all this time to get where you are now. You're not going to give it up now. So it's not about that. It's about that this fellowship would have ended. That's it. Strike the shepherd and the sheep scatter. That concept. So then I thought to myself, the pride wanted to rise itself up. And the pride basically stated, don't give her what she wants. But then the Spirit of Yahweh says, you have a choice. You can feed your pride, your ego, and whatever other unforgiveness you may have in your heart over the years about things that may have happened that you really never reconciled with. And in the flesh, you're going to feel pretty good. But you'll lose the ministry. Or you can concede that what your daughter needs is greater than what your need is. And that was the realization and the defining moment I had to come to grips with. My daughter needs my physical. When I say physical, kiss, hug, verbal affirmations. She needs that so bad she's crying because she doesn't get it, and I have withheld it unjustly. And so she was right. So the dilemma for me was, do I give her what she wants, as angry as I am with all the various events that which a lot of them I haven't even stated, have happened up to this point, which I'm now primed to be fit and tied up at this point? Or do I concede my own desires and give her what she wants? This is a make it or break it moment. And so it didn't take me but a flashing moment to say, I'm going to give up my pride. I'm going to give up my comfort of my flesh, even though it's not comfortably for me to do it. And I'm going to give my daughter what she wants and what she actually deserves. And so it was a very uncomfortable thing to have to face, but I had to deal with it, and I did. Is it perfect? No. But when I come home, I chase my daughter down. I said, where's my kiss? And I go, oh, you're going to give me another one today? If that's what it takes. And so I give my daughter what she needs. You see, women are constructed very differently than men. Men don't need to have that from just anybody. As long as his wife is giving him that kind of connection, he functions. You know? But for men, you know, we're rough around the edges and we kind of suck it up and we don't really need this lovey-dovey. There are some men that like the lovey-dovey. I'm not a lovey-dovey kind of guy, but you guys are actually showing me how to be a little more lovey-dovey, and I thank you for that. And maybe that's why Yahweh brought you here. And maybe when he's got me to the point I'm lovey-dovey, he'll move you on and somebody else will come. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. I really hope not. So the story's not over. I'm just kind of beginning, because then what happens is I have a friend of mine, I think some of you know about, not all of you know about. I talked about it about a year and a half ago. I hadn't seen him in many years, known him for many years, but he went to the South Pacific for a number of years, and then he came back, and then we hooked back up again. And Yahweh had me search him out. He didn't search me out. He was here 10 years and he never even looked me up. And I was kind of disappointed to find out he was here 10 years and he never once looked me up. I didn't know he was married. I didn't know he had some kids and blah, blah, blah. So I searched him out and I found him. And we hooked up. He came over and introduced his wife and his kids. We had food and we ate and we talked for hours and we kind of rekindled the relationship. Little did I know what was going to happen. And so what happened was, I think it was maybe 8 months to a year later, I get a text. And the text says, "It looks like I'm going home to be with the Lord." I thought, this is bizarre. So I call him on the phone. I said, "What does this text mean? Is this a riddle or is this literal?" And he starts crying. I go, "What's wrong?" He says, "I'm in Mount Sinai Hospital." I said, "What are you doing in Mount Sinai Hospital?" He says, "I just had an operation. They just took a tumor out of my head that was the size of a tangerine, and it's still big, but they couldn't cut it all out." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yes, and it's the most aggressive cancer that exists." I forget what the name of it is. Forgive me for that, but my point is made. So right away, my wife and I said, "Well, we're going to the hospital, Mount Sinai." We went over there. He had this big cut across his head like this, opened up his skull, you know. When he sees us, he starts crying like a baby. Now, he's a Catholic and not a real believer in the sense as we understand it, maybe on some superficial level, but not certainly the way we understand things. And so his doctors came in and stuff, and he's crying because he sees all of a sudden his life is passing in front of him. And he's got a wife with two younger kids, and he doesn't know what he's going to do, and he doesn't have any money to fall back on. He lost his job because what was happening is his speech was slurring and his left leg was dragging on the ground that afternoon. So something was wrong. So when he checked in, they did a CAT scan and found out he had this big tumor in his right side of his head. So they cut him open right away. So unfortunately, this particular kind of cancer, there's no medication that you can give that will reduce the cancer or eradicate it completely. And I've come to find out later on that even though they cut out most of it, or even if you cut it all out, they have what's called daughter cells. And daughter cells stay behind and they reproliferate. It's sort of like you cut a plant off at its base on the ground, you still got roots in the ground. So a new shoot just keeps coming back up. So unless you get rid of those roots on the cellular level, it just comes back. So then he started to progress again where he's getting worse and worse several months later. His voice was starting to slur again. He was getting slow. He was to the point where he'd come to my shop and he would start to fall and we'd have to grab him and put him in the chair. And he was like slow and slow. Now this is a type A personality kind of guy. This is a guy who's a real go-getter. This is a guy that talks fast and he's motivated and nothing holds him down. And now he's like an 80-year-old man. And I'm like, wow. So that last time when he came to my shop and we had to put him in the chair and I saw that the cancer was coming back and it was now affecting his motor skills. And Sharon here, who's a nurse, says that when motor skills go bad, when those cells die, they don't regenerate. They don't come back. They're dead. They're gone. You don't get it back. Your speech doesn't come back. Your stride doesn't come back. Whatever it's affecting, it doesn't come back. You're stuck with that at that level. So I was really grieved in my spirit when I saw that. So I went before Yahweh. I said, Yahweh, this is my friend. He's not a believer in the traditional sense, but he's my friend, and I don't want to see my friend die. They gave him 10 to 12 months to live, at best. 10 to 12 months. And then Yahweh spoke to me, and Yahweh said, go with your wife and your daughter to his house and pray for him. He didn't tell me he was going to heal him. He just said, go and pray for him. He didn't tell me what the outcome was. But I knew in my heart of hearts that there's no way the King of the universe is going to send me to the house to pray for him just to pray for him. Something was going to happen. There was a date with destiny. There was a mandate in there. He just didn't give me the details. So we went to his house, prayed over him, anointed him with oil. And after I was done praying for him, I explained to him, I brought my talit. I told him, I said, you know me as John Carney, the guy that used to do business with you, and we did these other things, but this is what you don't know about me. And I explained my testimony about my deathbed experience. And so what happened was, he says, there's not another person in the world I would want to pray over me other than you. So at face value, he accepted and believed what I stood for. So then we sat and we ate and so forth. And then I think about 3 weeks later, his voice started to come back. He had no more slur of speech. His speech was completely normal. The sluggishness on the left side of his body had returned. He had to fast walk again. It's like you would have never known he had cancer. And then he goes into the hospital to do his monthly CAT scan or MRI, whatever it was. And he's laying on the table and the scan's going through and it takes about 45 minutes. And behind the wall, the technician is making noises like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And he's laying there on the table like he's not allowed to talk or move. And he's thinking to himself, what's going on? And so he's not sure what's going on. So when it was all done, the technician comes out. She says, I'm going to say something to you, but you must make a promise to me. He goes, sure, what is it? She says, you can't tell anybody what I'm going to tell you because if you do, I'll get fired. He says, okay, I won't tell anybody. She says, I don't know what you're doing or what's happened, but this tumor has just reduced 70% of its size. And he was all jubilated. And so Yahweh was in the process of healing him. He was healing him. Because his motor skills had got repaired. And Sharon said, you don't get motor skills back. That in itself is a bona fide miracle. He was a bona fide miracle. But what I later to come to find out is somewhat conditional. Somewhat conditional. And this is where the problem and the paradox comes in. Because here we are 14 months later after that event. I saw him 3 weeks ago and his speech didn't look so good. And I thought to myself, oh no, the beast is back. And I kind of assumed that it would come back because Yahweh had extended mercy and grace and compassion to him and healed him, whether because I asked or whether Yahweh just sent me as an emissary, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But Yahweh healed him, but he did nothing with that grace. He did nothing with that mercy and compassion. And it's kind of like, isn't it like the parable of the talents where Yahweh gives a certain amount of talents to somebody and the last one, he gave him 1 talent and he takes it and he buries it in the ground. He did nothing with it. And Yeshua says, you are a wicked, lazy servant. You're going to be thrown into the lake. So when Yahweh gives you something, you must do something with it. Maybe you can't make it into 10 talents at this moment, but maybe you can make it into another half a talent? Something? Do something with it? And so my prayer was, at what point does this man understand that what Yahweh did for him, the King of the universe, looked down and had compassion on him and do something in return, saying, thank you, Messiah. Please forgive me of my sins and show me the way to life. But he never come to me to ask me nothing. And my hope was, he didn't have to come to me, but my hope was he would come to the King of the universe ask. But instead, what he did was he ran around out there, now that he had his health back, he's out there running around and he's chasing down business deals. He's chasing down different clinics around the world who have these trial procedures for cancer of this type, and he wants to get into this program and that program. And he's seeing this doctor and that doctor running this genetic test and that genetic test, trying to figure out how to get rid of it. And he's looking for messiahs in these doctors. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't have gone out and meet with doctors. But he was looking for the wrong Yahweh Raphi. He was looking for the wrong physicians. And so, 3 weeks later, he then texts me and says, John, the beast is back. I just had my scan. They said it grew 3 times bigger again. And my heart just dropped into my stomach. And I thought to myself, how stubborn this man is. How prideful this man is. You see, all these stories, and there are many more that I don't have time to go into, all these are coming to this central theme. We're all playing a role. They're all various stories coming together in this one story. And it culminates into today, which is why I'm saying what I'm saying. So he says, I want to come by your shop and I want to talk to you, because we had been going back and forth with texting, and I'm saying, John, you need to come to the Messiah. Remember, he's a Catholic. He thinks he's already following the Lord, as he would say. I said, no, you're not even close. Not even close. But in his mind, in his paradigm of belief system, he believes he's following the Lord. And I'm telling him, no, you're not. You need to come up to some higher levels. And I said, look at you. The beast is back. Something has changed in your life. There's something that you have ignored and you have not dealt with, and it's coming back. The healing has reversed itself. You are out of Yahweh's will. And he fought and argued with me in the text, to the point where he finally said, I want to come by your shop and I want to show you this project that we need to work on a little more. We're working on some kind of a project. And I was going to leave it alone because it was becoming a battle. I was fighting with him through these texts. He throws scriptures, I throw scriptures. He throws scriptures, I throw scriptures. You know, it just wasn't going anywhere. He knew what I was telling him, but he was evading the issue. Pride. Pride doesn't want him to submit and do Yahweh's will. I didn't know how many other ways I could tell him. He just wouldn't receive it. So he comes to the shop and he brings me the project. We talk about the project. I wasn't going to bring anything up because I didn't want to fight with him. I already said everything I could say. So then at the end of, we're done talking with the project, he says to me, he says, John, he says, will you pray for me? I said, about what? The beast, it's back. And now he looks even worse 3 weeks later than he was the 3 weeks I saw him before. His stride is getting slow, speech is slurring, words aren't coherent. I'm like, this man is in big trouble. Big trouble. I just lost a longtime friend of mine a few years ago to drugs and alcohol. Died in his sleep. Never got to rekindle a relationship with him. He's gone. Now I got another one that's dying for a different reason. Both stem from pride. Both of them. And I'm going to show you in a minute. So he says, will you pray for me? I said, about what? He says, the beast, it's back. Can you pray for me so it goes away? I said, no, I can't do it. You won't pray for me? I said, I already prayed for you. Yahweh was already healing you. What part of my text don't you understand? You are outside of Yahweh's will. That's why the curse is coming back. And then he starts to cry like a 5-year-old child. And it killed me. It killed me to watch him crying like a baby. Because in his heart of hearts, I knew I could feel his spirit. He knew he's going to die. Soon, he's going to die. And he's going to leave a wife and kids behind. And so I said, John, what I will pray for is that Yahweh help you destroy this spirit of pride that prevents you from coming to the Messiah. I'm following the Lord. I'm following the Lord. I said, damn it, you're not following the Lord. You're following your religion. You're following tradition. You're following doctrines of demons. This is not the right Messiah. Get real. I mean, I was yelling at him. I was furious with him because I felt in that moment that if I don't get this man's attention, he will die because nobody is speaking to him the truth. And I don't want another friend to die because of his foolish pride. It's a pride that will kill you. It'll destroy you. Pride will what? Make you miserable. Cause you to not get what you desire. The thing that you chase after the most will be denied. You ever try to go down a road that you want to get to and you're denied because you got a detour sign. Not today. You're not going to get it. It destroys your relationships. Causes you to judge incorrectly. Causes depression. I didn't talk about that. After I accepted the Yeshua, I went through severe depression for 20 years. In Yeshua. In Yeshua. I used to leave work. I was so depressed. It was in my earlier years, but still. It was progressive. It got better as the years went by. But I used to leave work at noontime because I didn't feel like working anymore because I had no hope. This is after I was healed miraculously. Stop and think about it. This pride was still a formidable force in my life, even till recently, and still to today. It hasn't gone away. Just depends on whether you get it under control or not. You manage. You keep the old man buried. And we choose not to let the old man bury. He's constantly rising up again out of that watery grave. And he's saying, no, I'm in control. I want what I want. And you will do what I want, not what Messiah wants. And that is our battle. That is our battle. Every day when we get up, that's our battle. To deny the old man legal jurisdiction over our life. It is spiritual warfare. And eventually, it will kill you. Because that is the nature of that beast. It is designed to ultimately kill you. It's designed to encroach on your life and take you over, chase you down, and consume you one day at a time until eventually it has a cumulative effect where it finally destroys you. I've seen many in the body of Messiah depart from Yeshua because of their pride. Because their life is not working for them. And because their life is not working for them, they feel that Yeshua has betrayed them. Therefore, he's not a real Messiah. He's wrong. I'm right, is what we say. That's pride. That's the epitome of pride. That we should judge the Messiah. Where if we would just simply humble ourselves and go and look in his words and see his wisdom, he will show us the way out of the pride. That kills us. Kills us on a daily basis. So I'm debating back and forth with my friend, and I'm yelling at him, and I'm chewing him out because I felt the violence of Yahweh's Spirit on me to wake this man up, because this is a moment that is important. If this man does not hear this fiery message now, he's done. And I was not going to let this man leave without me ripping a new one in him. He will make no mistake about it. He will understand who the Messiah is and what he wants for his life. It then will be on his head if he rejects it. And I can wash my hands at that point. So I told him, I said, the religion that you're chasing, stop and think about this for a moment, I said. When we parted back in the late 80s and you went to the South Pacific, you came back in the late 90s, you never once looked me up. I chased you down. I didn't know why Yahweh had me chase you down, but he had me chase you down, and here we are today. Now, had I not chased you down, you may have been dead a year ago. Yahweh has a divine purpose and plan for why we do what we do. We just don't always understand the end from the beginning. That's our problem. That's where faith comes in. That's where quenching the spirit of pride needs to come into play. Because Yahweh doesn't do things by mistake or by coincidence. It is a divine mandate. And so I said to him, I said, isn't this ironic? I said to him, stop and think about this. I was on my deathbed. I wanted to die. I didn't want to live. I wanted to die. Please take me out of here. Whoever, take me out of here. I did not want to live. And here you are running around the country trying to find a way to live. That's the difference between the two of us. But there's another one. There's another one. The other difference between the two of us is when Messiah healed me when I wasn't even looking for it and I didn't even want it, when he gave me my healing, I sought the Messiah. And here I am today. And here's the funny thing. The Messiah you follow didn't even look down on you to give you a healing. He didn't offer it to you. You came to my Messiah. And you asked my Jewish Messiah to come and heal you, and he did. And now you spit in his face by revoking the invitation that was sent to you. You think he just looked down to heal you so you can run to the doctors and run and get patents and do these business deals and stuff like that? No, that's not why he healed you. There was a reason for it. Search out that reason. Thank him. Ask him to forgive you of your sins. I can't do it. Why can't you do it? Because you're asking me to come to a Jewish thing. I said, what's the matter with you? What is the matter with you? What do you think the Messiah is? A pagan Christian? He goes, no, he was Jewish. I said, so what do you think he came to bring in the faith? Stop this nonsense. Accept the Jewish Messiah. He's the one that healed you. Now he's removing the healing. Do you not see the sense of urgency here? I'm telling you, I says, you're going to die because you're a very prideful man, and that pride is going to kill you. And he starts crying again. He goes, yeah, I'm going to die. And then 30 seconds later, the pride rises back up again. No, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. I'm following the Lord. I'm doing the Lord's the will of the Lord and so forth like that. I said, you're nuts. Your pride has blinded you. And you're going to go to your grave. And then you start crying again. And finally it all came down to the point where I said to him, I said, you know what? I'm not going to strive with you anymore because Yahweh won't strive with us forever. He's going to give us what we need to hear. And if we don't believe it at that level in faith, then the measure of faith is not even in you. You have quenched it. You have discarded it. You've treated it like rubbish. And it will do nothing for you. You will not profit from it. I said, at this point, I turn you over to the Messiah. It's between you and him. Because I'm not going to fight with you. You're my friend, and I love you. And I said, give me a hug. And I hugged him. And he cried on my shoulder for about 4 or 5 minutes like a baby. And I felt the frailness of his body. Like the spirit of death is not much longer for him. And through all of that, he still would not accept. He says, I know you love me. I know you're my friend. I know you care about me, blah, blah, but I just can't do it. You know what? There are some things humans can't do, but most of the things we won't do because of pride. I won't do it because it doesn't profit my flesh. And I want to gratify my flesh and my emotions, and I want my way. That's pride. Been there, done that. Been there, done that. I'm going to leave you with some scriptures to ponder and think about. It's a serious matter. If the body of Messiah is ever going to get to a point where it's going to be fully functional, walking in the full power and authority of Yeshua, we got to lick this thing. And if we lick it in our lives, we got to use ourselves to help others who are struggling through this very difficult thing to understand. Because it's real. It is the emotions, the belief system behind it are very real. Before I actually get to that, there's something I wanted to do. Almost forgot about it. I'll pull this out here. Whoops. Sorry. Okay.
No, you got it.
Oh. Wow. Okay. Let me pull this over here. You see, pride is fed by beliefs. I've done it before, but I'm going to do it a little bit more. This is pride. Pride has beliefs. I'm going to oversimplify this because this could get quite deep and I don't want to go that deep. But I want to go back to the couple that believes that when you invoke the name of Yahweh the Father, you're not a believer in Yeshua. Okay? And so their belief is stating the name of Yahweh nullifies the fact that you're a believer in Yeshua. Okay? That's what they believe. Pure and simple. And the reason for that comes from doctrines of demons, which comes through Judaism, which is a leg under the table. You see, all of our beliefs have legs under our tables. And in this particular case, chances are their belief is a very weak belief. And that is, they believe that this reference is you only invoke Yeshua. There is no name, because what they're told is, another reference is no other name under heaven. That's another reference that these support this belief. You understand? Our beliefs have a structure to it. When we understand that it's like a tabletop and the legs are references that gives them reasons why they need to believe it that way, they can't see it the way my daughter tried to explain it. But all the scriptures my daughter was giving this woman was tearing her to pieces to the point where she actually hung up the phone because she couldn't handle hearing the verses that was contradicting this belief. And so what my daughter was doing is she was sweeping these legs out from under her table, and it made her uncomfortable. And the reason why I believe it made her uncomfortable is because she felt like if she became convicted of it, she was going to have another problem. She's going to have to go to her husband and explain that to him, and he ain't going to have it. And now there's going to be division in the house, and she doesn't want division in the house. So she would rather stay in her delusion, her erroneous beliefs, doctrines of demons, than accept the fact that all the scriptures my daughter gave her that she could not contend with, and change that belief. So she would not allow her legs to be swept under for that table, thus collapsing the belief system and supplanting it with the correct one. This is the problem in the body of Messiah today. We have these beliefs and they're structured in such a way, some of us have like tons of legs under the table. And so when you come up against a person, sometimes it's really, really hard to get them to see what you're saying because they got so many references, so many legs under the table of that belief that it's hard to sweep them out. And so their belief stays. And some people are not highly convicted. And so you can sweep those legs out from under the table, and then the table collapses, and then they believe the new way, the correct way. This is what we're fighting with. Hasatan understands the carnal mind. He knows how beliefs, references, emotions, there's a lot I could get into, but he knows how all this is structured in our conscious and our subconscious. We don't usually tap into our subconscious, but that's where these files are located. Anthony was telling me the other day about a message he heard about calling the mind like chambers, the word chambers. And it's correct because in our mind we have chambers. And in those chambers we have folders. And folders for different doctrines in this particular case that have these different belief systems in there and certain emotional attachments to it. But inside those folders with those beliefs, we also have what's called imaginations. And so we have these vain imaginations inserted into the folder with that belief, and to access that and draw it out and pull out what's wrong to supplant it with what's right, most people don't know how to do. They don't even know that concept even exists. Because they somehow think when they come to Yeshua, he's just going to wave this magic wand, and I'm going to get laid out on the floor, and I'm going to be like Paul when my eyes open up and I can see again, voila, I got this perfect life. Paul didn't have a perfect life at that point. He went through hell for another 17 years before he actually really started full-fledged ministry. But that's a different subject. Let me give you some scriptures. In Leviticus chapter 26, verse 18 through 21, it states, "And after this, if you do not obey," which is the Shema, we've all heard that, "by listening with intelligence to me, then I will punish you 7 times for more for your sins." You see, he's telling us in the Hebrew, intelligence. Intelligence means the opposite of pride. If your pride is saying, I don't want to hear what you're telling me, pride is preventing intelligence from taking over. So you as a person have to decide in your mind, I am going to suspend my pride so that my intelligence can comprehend what Yahweh's trying to tell me.
May I throw a scripture out there that's been popping up?
What's that?
It's in Proverbs. I don't exactly where it is?
I'm going through, I'm not sure it's in the Proverbs, but I'll be going through some of the, like the Psalms and stuff.
If you
Just,
turn your ear away from your
yeah, there was millions of them I can give. I would be here, I would be here for the next 6 hours if I put all this, I just grabbed some stuff. Then we'll punish you 7 times more for your sins, which is habitual. You see, we have sins that are habitual and we have sins that are not habitual. When we're prideful, we are sabotaging ourselves over and over again. It's a sin that leads to habitualness. And we're destroying ourselves every time. The very thing you want is exactly what you're not going to get, because your pride prevents that. It puts a block in there and it stops it. Yahweh will not bless it. You're not going to get it until you get this under control. I could not have effective ministry years ago. I had successful ministries, but they all got sabotaged and destroyed because my pride was not under control, and it got used against me every single time. Hence why Yahweh said, you better handle this correctly or it's the end again. And I'm not going through that again. I'm not going through all the work I went to raise up different ministries just to have the devil come and sweep the legs out from underneath me and the whole thing collapses. I'm done with that. I'm tired with it. Verse 19, I will break into pieces and crush the pride of arrogancy that puffs you up of your power. That's what that word means. And that word power is hardened, secured strength. You see, when we're prideful, we're holding on to our own personal strength. I'm right and everybody else is wrong, and I am not letting go. I'm holding on to my strength because I am right. That's your own personal strength. That's what pride gets fed from. I will make your heavens like iron and your earth like bronze, and your strength shall be spent in vain, which is empty with no purpose. So the word vain means empty with no purpose. See, at my age, where I finally come to, I'm like, why am I doing this? Only an insane person would keep trying to do this over and over again and to have it come to no purpose. Quite frankly, I'm at an age where I'm done with that. And I tell Yahweh, if there's not going to be a purpose behind what I'm going through, take me out of this. I'd rather go back to keeping the Sabbath with my family alone, and that's it. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a purpose behind this. I don't want it to be vain. Show me where I'm making my mistake so I can not make that mistake. For you, the land shall not yield its produce, nor the trees of the land yield their fruit. In verse 21, then if you walk contrary, and this is interesting, the word contrary is in hostility. That word in the Hebrew means hostility. It just doesn't mean that if I tell you go to the right, you're going to the left. I'm going to the left, but in hostility. In other words, I'm defiant, I'm arrogant, I'm belligerent, and I am not going to cooperate. That's what that word's trying to get across. So in the English, a lot of times when we read this, it doesn't have much impact, which is why I spend time trying to go back into the Hebrew to bring out the flavor of what Yahweh's trying to get across to me, and are not willing to obey me, I will bring you on 7 times more plagues according to your sins. Then, when Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2, it says, when pride, which is arrogance that comes from being presumptuous. Lately, and I've been talking to my brother Anthony, he's been telling me he's going through the same thing. And that is, lately I found myself presuming that somebody is doing something for such and such reason. I don't say anything, but I'm presuming that's why it's being done. And then later on, I find out it was really something else completely different. And I thought to myself, oh wow, am I glad I didn't open my mouth, because I would have been in trouble. That's pride. That's pride. It's correct, but that is pride in itself. Why? Because I didn't want to get exposed for being wrong in my presumptuousness. That's pride. Is it not? Even though it's still true. But what it was showing me over and over and over again, every time I was making assumptions about stuff, I was coming out wrong. And Yahweh's saying, you got to stop. If I tell you what the reason is, that's one thing. But in your own vain imaginations, if you're concocting through your own arrogance what you think it is, you're in trouble. and I'm trying to protect you. Wake up, pay attention, stop doing that unless I give you the word as to what's going on. Move on. And then comes shame, which is disgrace that basically leads to confusion. That's how confusion works its way in. Because how could I have been wrong? But with the humble is wisdom instead. Verse 10, by pride, disgrace with confusion comes nothing but strife, which means debates that lead to quarrels. Strife is debates that lead to quarrels. But with the well-advised who set themselves to resolve matters, blessed are the peacemakers. Anybody? That's kind of what it's talking about. Is wisdom, which is skill that can lead. It's about attaining a skill that allows us to be able to lead. In verse 3, in the mouth of a fool, Proverbs 14:3, in the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise will preserve as a hedge of thorns around them. So Yahweh, if you will implement getting rid of the pride in your life, He will literally put a hedge of thorns around you. It doesn't mean you're going to get rid of it every time. It just means that you're a committee of one to confront the pride in your life, and you're deciding, I'm going to do everything I can to be on guard about this and bring it into check. It may slip out every now and then. That happens. It's a process. He understands that. But this is the difference between somebody who's operating in the fullness of pride, who is arrogant and just really doesn't care because they want their way, versus somebody who's trying to actively get it under control. That's what it's talking about. Verse 18 in Proverbs 16. Pride, disgrace with confusion, goes before destruction. Pride, which is disgrace with confusion, goes before destruction. Vexation and irritation. You ever get irritated? That comes from destruction. And a haughty, the highest level of prideful, that's what haughty means. It's the highest level of prideful. So there's a superficial level of pride, and then there's complete arrogance. Complete arrogance, where you're so disassociated from reality that you've actually created your own reality and you're living that reality, and everybody's like, what in the world are you talking about? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You can't even have a legitimate conversation or rationalization with the person. That's when it gets to that level, and that's when it's really, really dangerous. Spirit before a fall, which is utter ruin. And that fall is utter ruin in Hebrew. Proverbs 29:23, a man's pride will bring him low, which means to sink into depression. That's what happened to me many years ago. I fought depression for 20 years because I would not confront my pride. And I just stayed there, and nothing changed until Yahweh started showing me what was wrong, and then I had to start softening my heart. I had to really get beat up to get to that point because I got tired of it. It was wearing me out. But the humble in spirit will retain honor. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 5 says, this is a faithful saying, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. Verse 2, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, with self-control. See, pride gets out of control when there's no self-control. A good behavior, which means they're orderly. They're a very orderly type person. Hospitable, which means you're fond of guests. You guys are here because we're fond of having you here. At least that's what I try to do. I know I don't do it perfectly, but that's my general foundation. Able to teach. Verse 3, not given to wine that causes toppling or a tipping effect. In other words, you become intoxicated. You drink to that degree. Not that there's anything wrong with wine, but you don't want to get to that point. Not violent with brawling. In other words, you have this brawling spirit. You want to get into the mud and you want to sling it out. That's the attitude. Not greedy for money, but gentle. Not quarrelsome, which is inflicting pains with words. That's what that word quarrelsome means in the Greek. Not covetousness. Verse 4, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how he will take care of the church of Yahweh. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17 states, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. To be prideful is to be of the world, because the world functions on the spirit of pride. So you're joining up with them when you are functioning in that kind of a realm. Verse 16, for all that is in the world, the lust, which is to covet what one's heart is set on, of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride, the self-confident bragging, that's what that word means, of life, is not of the Father, but is of this world. Verse 17, and the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of Yahweh abides forever. James chapter 4, verse 1 through 6, where the source or the cause of wars and fights, in other words, where do they come from? They're controversial battles. That's what they are. They're battles that create controversy. Comes from among you. Do they not come from your desires? See, this comes back to the flesh. This comes back to the pride again. We all have passions and desires in us that we want to fulfill. Some of them are realistic. Some of them are not realistic. The ones that are not realistic may not be that they're not realistic somewhere down the road, but they're not realistic for the moment, because you're not qualified and you're not ready emotionally and spiritually to handle it. Because if you don't get this under control, you can't handle that. So it's being denied. Denied, denied, denied. You put in applications, denied, denied, denied. You're being denied because the qualifications are not there to receive it and to take care of it and to nurture it and make it blossom. It's kind of like failing third grade. We got to send you back to third grade. You can't go to fourth grade. Get third grade straightened out, then we can let you go to fourth grade. And this is what Yahweh's telling us. For pleasure that war, and that word war means that serves as a military campaign towards carnal inclination. So in the Greek, that means that serves as a military campaign towards carnal inclination. And so people who like the war in the flesh, it's like a military that's marching towards an end result. And the end result is a carnal inclination to have a clash, to have a battle, to have a fight. I'm going to conquer you, I'm going to dominate you, and I'm going to overtake you. That's what's in the Spirit. In your members, which is your body parts, some of us use our hands, some of us use our mouth, some of us use our eyes, some of us use our ears, some of us use our tongues, you know. We use different parts of our body where these wars of military are in these parts of our body, and we use those parts to inflict damage on the other person because it makes us feel good to do that. That's pride. That will kill you. It is pride that will kill you. James chapter 4, verse 2. You lust to covet what one's heart is set on and do not have. So you covet what you want, but you're not going to get it, is what it's saying. And you're not going to get it because it's possessed with joy. You murder and covet with a warm feeling. In other words, you have stuff inside you that you want so badly that you have a warm emotion to getting it. You visualize it in your mind, and you know that one day you're going to get this thing, and so you got these warm feelings about wanting to get this, but you're not going to get it in that present state of mind. And cannot, as you have no power to obtain it. And the reason why you don't have the power is because the spirit of pride prevents you from getting what you desire. Remove the pride and you'll get what you want. You fight, which means to strive with disputes, and you war, yet none of you have them because you do not ask. Verse 3, you ask and you don't receive. So some people say, that's nonsense. I do ask, but you don't get it. Why? Because you ask amiss. And the word amiss means in an immorally diseased and evil state. Yahweh is not going to bless you with a blessing if you're in an evil, immoral state of mind. Hence pride. That's where pride takes you. And so you're not going to get what you want. That you may spend or incur it in a wasteful or costly kind of way. In other words, you're just going to squander it. I've got somebody that works for me who's always complaining that they don't have enough money. And then when they start telling me what they're spending their money on, I'm thinking to myself, and I just had this conversation yesterday, I'm telling them, you got to stop spending it on this and this and this and that, and then you would have money to do the things that you want to do. You're spending it. I want a tattoo here, I want a tattoo there, and pull up the thing here and say, look at this tattoo, I'm going to tattoo over there. I'm thinking to myself, no wonder you don't have any money for what you want. You're squandering it on wasteful things. That doesn't mean anything. Oh, well, it's a dedication to my mother or father. Well, there's other ways you could dedicate to your mother and father. You don't have to spend $400 or $500 on a tattoo to do that. After all, you spent that money to put this one here. Now you're going to write over top of that with another one? But this is what we do. On your pleasures, which is sensual delight that comes from your lust. That's where it comes from. Verse 4, adulterers and adulteresses. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity and hatred with Yahweh? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Yahweh. Verse 5, or do you think that the scripture says in vain, the spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously or ill will distractions? Yahweh doesn't want us to have ill will distractions. He wants us to be focused on Him and what His will is for us. These things of the world, what He's talking about out there, are distractions. They appeal to the flesh. They appeal to your pride. And that's what lures you in, and it reels you in, and it captures you. And you're stuck. And you don't know how to get out. And that's what happens to us. Verse 6, but He gives more grace, which is divine influence on the heart, to be grateful. That's what grace is. Divine influence on your heart. So when we're with another person where we're having these wars and these battles, somebody has got to decide, I'm going to operate in grace. I'm not going to operate in the pride, and I'm not going to operate in the flesh. I am going to be a committee of one to control my own pride. And if you decide you're going to operate in your pride anyway, it will have no effect on me because I won't allow it. You give permission for somebody else's pride to enter into your spirit and overtake you. And that's a whole belief structure in and of itself. Therefore, he says, Yahweh resists, and the word resist in the Greek means to oppose. Stop and think about this. Yahweh opposes the proud or the prideful. He opposes them. Confrontation with Yahweh directly when we're in this state of mind. Who exalts themselves above others. But His grace, which is divine influence on the heart, to be grateful, He gives to the humble. So these are the two polar opposites on the spiritual realm. Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he falls into the same condemnation as the devil. So what do we see? What we see is in Isaiah and Ezekiel that it was Satan's pride. He was filled with pride and beauty and arrogance. And it was the abundance of his murmuring and complaining against Yahweh to the other third of the angels that got him into trouble. He got puffed up in his pride. And this is what he's talking about here. So in conclusion, pride is a dangerous force to be reckoned with. I came close, somewhat close, to losing this ministry and shutting it down. If I had made the choice to entertain my pride and not bring it under control and give somebody something that they wanted and deserved that in the past I had chosen for whatever reason in my pride not to give it. And so if I don't give, I can't receive. And we are told in Scripture it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And so pride means that we need to put it under control. We need to attack it with all vengeance and bring it under submission to the Messiah. Because the Scripture says, let this mind be in you that is in Messiah Yeshua. What is that mind? That mind had no ounce of leaven and pride in it. And I think this message is very poignant because we just came through the days of unleavened bread, which shadow pictures the fact we're supposed to stay de-leavened, even though it's still not the days of unleavened bread. But as the bride of Messiah, we're not supposed to allow any chametz, any of this leaven into our lives, because we're now coming up to Shavuot, where Yahweh is going to give us the ketubah, the marriage contract, which gives us more details about our betrothal to Him. And then once we receive that, if we're faithful to do it, not allow the leaven in and allow the pride to prevent us from seeing what's in that marriage contract, we then move on to Yom Teruah. And it's only those in the body of Messiah who stay pure as the bride and keep the spirit of pride out of her life and only stays focused on Yeshua, that she will get to be snatched up by Yeshua and taken to the Father, to be presented to the Father, and will marry the groom. And then the party really begins. But we have got to lick this now. If we are going to make it in the body of the Messiah, we got to get this under control. Don't let pride have a root of bitterness or any kind of root in your life. Bring it under control. It is hiding, it is lurking in all of us in different ways. And we need to go in and search it out and ask Yahweh with mercy, please remove this pride from me. And help me to put a guard of protection of thorns around myself so it never, ever, ever comes in and dominates me again. Amen? Amen. In Yeshua's mighty name, Abba, I thank you for giving me the strength, Abba, to articulate this message. I thank you, Yahweh, that you put me through some of these hard times. Not that I'm anybody, but you put me through some of these hard times to learn these very, very painful lessons about pride. Even now, Yahweh. And I pray, Abba, that for all of us in the body of Messiah, not just us here, that we get real, Abba. There's too many that are fighting with each other in the body of Messiah over such frivolous things because of the spirit of pride. And I'm praying, Yahweh, that you send forth your Spirit, send forth the blood of Yeshua to cleanse us from all filthiness and unrighteousness which comes from the enemy. That is, he's using this tool, this weapon against the body of Messiah to destroy it as he tried to come against this ministry. And so, Abba, I am praying mercy and compassion upon your people. I'm praying, Yahweh, for the right leaders to stand up and be a true example to their flocks, that they root out every bitterness and every level of pride in their lives, Abba, that they are open book, and that they are not hiding anything, Yahweh, that the devil can use against them. Bless you, Abba. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for his sacrifice. Thank you for these feast days that shows us these shadow pictures of these different lessons, Abba, that you're trying to teach your bride of how to come into conformity of the one that she's about to marry, and help her to take it seriously, Abba. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Amen.